Imagine ruling the richest nation on earth. For centuries, your empire has stood at the center of civilization. Your silks and porcelains are coveted by kings. Your tea fills the cups of nobles across oceans. Your artisans, your scholars, your armies, each a symbol of refinement and power. Foreign monarchs kneel to pay tribute. The very idea of a world beyond your borders feels distant, almost irrelevant. After all, what could the barbarians possibly offer that China does not already possess? And then, one day, the tide begins to turn. Not with cannons, not with armies, not with revolution, but with something deceptively small, something alive, delicate and perfumed. A flower, a single plant, the poppy, whose milky sap would bring an empire to its knees. This is not a fable. This is history. The true story of how the opium trade, one of the most profitable enterprises in human history, unraveled China's greatest dynasty, reshaped global economics, and began what the Chinese would later call the century of humiliation. It is a story of pride and addiction, of silver and smoke, of empires trading morality for profit, and of a civilization that, for centuries, believed itself eternal, until one fragile flower exposed its greatest weakness. So tonight, as you settle in, perhaps lying in bed, letting the world fade into stillness, allow me to guide you back 200 years, to a world lit by oil lamps and perfumed by spice and salt air. A world where the richest harbor on earth hummed with life, trade, and ambition. Where Western merchants whispered in smoky taverns, plotting fortunes. And where, far away in Beijing, an emperor slept soundly, unaware that his empire's collapse had already begun. This is not merely a tale about drugs or trade. It is about the fragility of greatness, how power decays quietly, choice by choice, until collapse feels inevitable, and how history, like smoke, lingers long after the fire has burned out. Welcome, traveler, to the story of how opium destroyed China's greatest empire. Let us begin our journey. In Canton, the year 1800, where silver glitters in the sun, the air hums with commerce, and the seeds of ruin are about to be sown. Part 1. The Middle Kingdom at its peak. The year is 1800. Dawn breaks over the city of Canton, the empire's southern gate to the world. A golden haze hangs over the Pearl River, glinting off the masts of hundreds of ships. Sails from Britain, Portugal, France, and America fill the horizon, all converging on one place. The only port in China where foreigners are allowed to trade. Listen closely. You can hear it, the chorus of global ambition. Wooden crates creak, ropes snap, merchants shout across the docks. The air smells of salt, silk, spices, and sweat. Everywhere, men move with purpose. Chinese stevedores carrying porcelain jars, English traders counting silver coins, Indian sailors hauling crates of tea leaves bound for London. If you could freeze this moment, you would see the world's wealth flowing in a single direction, into China. Because at the turn of the 19th century, China is the superpower. No rival even comes close. Its population surpasses 300 million, larger than all of Europe combined. Its workshops produce 1/3 of everything made on Earth. Its scholars preserve knowledge refined over millennia. And its emperor, seated on the dragon throne in Beijing, considers himself not merely a ruler, but the pivot of civilization itself. To the Chinese court, the world is simple. There is the Middle Kingdom, the heart of humanity, and there are the barbarians who circle it. For centuries, this worldview has gone unchallenged. China's inventions, paper, gunpowder, printing, the compass, have shaped civilizations beyond its borders. Its porcelain is as prized in Paris as its silk is in St. Petersburg. European monarchs drink tea every morning, yet China has no need for European goods in return. The emperor's message to foreign envoys is clear, even contemptuous. We have all that we need. There is nothing you can offer that we desire. That arrogance is not unfounded. From the perspective of the Qing Dynasty, Western visitors truly are backward, brash, undisciplined, and obsessed with material wealth. The empire's cities, Beijing, Suzhou, Nanjing, are centers of art, philosophy, and technology. Its bureaucracy functions like clockwork, governed by Confucian virtue and an examination system that rewards intellect over birth. But behind that perfection, something dangerous is brewing. For all its refinement, the Qing Empire is rigid. It prizes tradition over innovation. Its scholars study ancient texts, not new sciences. Its army is large, but antiquated. Its industries are proud, but slow to modernize. And its rulers, wrapped in silk and ceremony, believe the world will forever orbit around China's light. History, however, has other plans. At the docks of Canton, foreign merchants are not treated as partners, but as tolerated guests. They may trade only in designated factories, trading houses lined up along the riverbank. They cannot bring their families. They cannot travel inland. They cannot learn the Chinese language. Every transaction must pass through government-approved intermediaries known as the Hong merchants, a small elite group who hold the keys to China's foreign trade. Among them, one man stands above all others, Hao Kuo, the richest merchant in the world. His fortune is legendary. When fires broke out in 1822, witnesses swore they saw rivers of silver flowing through the streets as his vaults melted in the heat. His name alone commands fear and respect. Western traders flatter him, Chinese officials envy him, and every coin that changes hands in Canton seems to pass, at some point, through Hao Kuo's grasp. And yet, even he cannot see the gathering storm, because at this moment, at the height of China's wealth and confidence, its downfall has already begun. You see, trade is a delicate balance. Europe's hunger for Chinese goods, tea, porcelain, silk, is insatiable. Ships sail home to London loaded with treasures, but they return nearly empty. The Chinese want little in return except one thing: silver. And so, silver pours into China, year after year. Ton after ton, Europe's treasuries are drained dry. Merchants and ministers in London begin to panic. How long can this continue? How can they trade with a nation that refuses to buy anything they make? For Britain, the answer lies not in diplomacy or innovation, but in manipulation. They will find something China cannot resist. A product that will reverse the flow of silver, weaken the empire from within, and bind it in invisible chains of dependency. That product will not be gold, or steel, or machinery. It will be something far more seductive. Something that clouds the mind, softens the will, and enslaves the soul. It will be opium. Before the century is over, this single trade will reverse the balance of power in Asia. It will drain the wealth of the world's greatest empire. It will spark wars, topple dynasties, and rewrite the map of global politics. And it will all begin here, on these humid docks in Canton, where foreign ships wait patiently, their holds already filled with a poison that will change history. Part 2. The Flower of Fortune. How Opium Entered the Empire. Night falls over Canton. The noise of the docks fades into the background, replaced by the soft splash of oars on the dark water. Small boats move quietly between the anchored ships, their lanterns shuttered, their cargo unseen. This is how it begins, not with declarations or armies, but with whispers in the night. One of those ships bears no flag. Its decks are nearly empty, but below, hidden behind crates of cloth and spices, lies a treasure unlike any other. Not silver, not gold, but a drug so potent it can conquer a nation without firing a shot. Opium. Imported from the fields of Bengal, cultivated under the supervision of the British East India Company, this resinous, sticky substance is pressed into balls and packed in chests. Each chest weighs about 140 pounds, enough to intoxicate hundreds, perhaps thousands of users. In India, British officials tax and regulate its production. In China, it is strictly illegal. But illegality, as every smuggler knows, only raises the price. The merchants call it the flower of fortune. The Chinese call it the black poison. To the British, it is simply the solution to their trade deficit, to their empty vaults, to their thirst for tea. They know the Chinese won't buy European goods, so they decide to sell them oblivion instead. At first, the trade is small. In 1800, perhaps 4,000 or 5,000 chests make their way into China each year. They are purchased quietly by wealthy elites, scholars, courtiers, rich merchants who smoke it in private, believing it a harmless luxury, a mark of sophistication. But word spreads quickly. The wealthy teach their servants, the servants teach their friends. Within a generation, opium has found its way into every layer of Chinese society. What began as an indulgence becomes an epidemic. Picture it. A room thick with sweet, acrid smoke. Men lie stretched on wooden platforms, their eyes half closed, faces lit by the flickering flame of oil lamps. A servant kneels beside each of them, heating a dark lump of opium over a small flame, then placing it carefully into a pipe. The smoker inhales, exhales slowly, and for a moment the world vanishes. Pain, hunger, fear, all dissolve in a haze of bliss. Another puff, and the senses blur. Another, and reality itself fades away. One by one, the empire's brightest minds drift into the dream. Across the city, the silver that once flowed into China begins to flow out again. Foreign merchants receive payment not in goods, but in bullion, bars of pure silver, shipped back to India and London. The empire's wealth, its very lifeblood, is bleeding away, ounce by ounce, and yet demand keeps growing. By the 1820s, the smuggling routes expand. British clippers, sleek, fast, and nearly untouchable, anchor off the coast at places like Linton Island, beyond the reach of Chinese law. Local smugglers row out under cover of darkness, trade cash for chests, and return before dawn. From there, the opium travels inland, hidden in cargoes of tea and silk, bribes paid at every checkpoint. Officials look the other way, some out of fear, some out of greed, and some because they too are addicted. In London, the profits are staggering. The East India Company's ledgers overflow. Merchants who once traded in porcelain now trade in dreams, and the moral implications trouble no one. They call it free trade, as if freedom and poison were the same thing. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the imperial court remains largely unaware of how deep the rot has spread. The emperor still receives tribute from vassal states, still believes his empire unshakable. Reports from the southern provinces are vague, often suppressed or softened. Who dares tell the Son of Heaven that his people are enslaved not by arms, but by a pipe? But some do know, and they are afraid. In Canton, one of the Hong merchants, Hao himself, begins to sense the danger. He sees the rising number of addicts. He hears rumors that villages are emptying, that soldiers are pawning their weapons, that farmers are abandoning their fields to smoke away their days. Silver is disappearing, taxes are collapsing, and still the foreign ships keep coming. He writes quietly to his partners overseas, moving his fortune into safer hands. He knows what's coming, perhaps not when or how, but soon. Because beneath the surface of this glittering empire, the balance of power is shifting. The British have found what the Chinese will buy, and they will not stop. Not for morality, not for law, not for human life. They have discovered that an empire's pride can be broken, not through war, but through desire. And once that desire takes root, it cannot be easily undone. By 1830, the numbers are terrifying. The opium trade has quadrupled. Tens of thousands of chests enter China each year. Millions of pounds of the drug flood its markets. Silver vanishes from the treasury. Inflation soars. The economy begins to buckle. Yet for those profiting from the trade, it is the golden age. British merchants grow rich beyond measure. American traders join in, hungry for their share. And Chinese intermediaries, corrupt officials, ambitious smugglers, desperate peasants take part as well. The addiction is not just physical, it is economic, moral, and national. In a dimly lit office overlooking the harbour, two Scottish merchants sit across a table covered in ledgers and maps. Their names, William Jardine and James Matheson. Both former surgeons turned traders. They now control one of the most powerful smuggling networks in Asia. They plan routes, hire captains, bribe officials, and coordinate shipments that reach every corner of the empire. Their company, Jardine Matheson & Co., will one day be known as one of the most profitable enterprises in British history. But tonight, they're not thinking about history. They're thinking about the next shipment, about silver, ships, and profit margins. The moral cost does not enter the conversation. Outside, the harbour shimmers under the moonlight. From the decks of British ships, faint wisps of opium smoke drift into the air. In the streets below, beggars sleep beside crates of luxury goods they will never touch. And in quiet rooms across the city, men and women inhale the same poison that will one day undo their empire. The balance of trade has shifted. China's wealth is draining away, its people are fading into dreams, and its rulers, still believing themselves untouchable, have yet to wake up. The British have found the perfect weapon, a war that requires no soldiers, a conquest fought not on battlefields, but in the lungs and minds of its victims. Every puff of smoke is a victory. Every chest of opium, a declaration of war, a silent war, one China doesn't yet know it's losing. Part 3. The empire sleeps, addiction, collapse, and the call for justice. The year is 1830. The air over Canton is no longer filled with the energy of wealth and trade, but with something heavier. A sweet, acrid scent hangs over the city. Familiar now, almost ordinary. It drifts through alleys, tea houses, even the courtyards of temples. It is the scent of opium smoke, rising like incense to forgotten gods. China, once proud, now dreams. The city has changed. The docks are still busy, but the faces have grown thin, tired, distracted. Merchants who once counted silver now count debts. The sparkle of prosperity remains, but it is only a reflection, not the light itself. Beneath the surface, decay spreads quietly. Step into a tea house near the harbour. At first, it looks the same as ever. Wooden tables, steaming kettles, men in long robes sipping from porcelain cups. But look closer. In the corner, a scholar in official dress leans against the wall, his eyelids heavy. A pipe rests in his hand. Beside him, a dock worker, skin stretched over bone, takes a long draw and exhales slowly, a faint smile on his lips. The air is thick and motionless. No one speaks. No one needs to. The silence is the sound of a nation dreaming itself into ruin. Outside, silver drains away. The empire's monetary system, once stable, begins to collapse. The value of coins doubles within a decade. Prices spiral. Taxes become unbearable. The poor sell their tools, their furniture, their fields, anything to buy another dose. Opium is no longer a luxury of the elite. It has become the lifeblood of the desperate. In villages far from the coast, fields that once grew rice now grow poppies. Farmers discover that the flour yields more profit than grain. Hunger spreads, but the smoke offers escape, and escape is easier than resistance. The emperor in Beijing hears only fragments. His courtiers filter the reports, afraid to bear bad news. They speak of disruptions, of minor moral decline. No one dares to say the truth aloud. The empire is addicted, and with every shipment unloaded in Canton, it becomes weaker. The people's bodies decay, the treasury bleeds, and the authority of the throne, once absolute, erodes like dust in the wind. Meanwhile, the foreign merchants thrive. In their shaded offices along the river, British and American traders calculate profits, arguing over percentages and tonnage. They see the empire's decline as opportunity, not tragedy. For them, every addict is a customer, every confiscation a challenge to overcome, every moral law a price of doing business. They speak in the language of commerce, but what they sell is destruction. Among the Chinese elite, whispers spread of a moral crisis. Scholars write petitions to the throne, condemning the trade, warning of national ruin. "Our soldiers are weakened," one memorial reads. "Our officials are corrupted. The people waste their strength, and silver flows like water into the sea. If we do not act, the foundation of the realm will crumble." Most of these warnings are ignored. In Canton, even the mighty Haokua senses the turning of the tide. He has built his fortune on the empire's trade, yet he knows that wealth is a fragile wall against decay. He hears that opium has reached Beijing itself, that courtiers smoke behind silk curtains while preaching virtue in daylight. He begins to move his money abroad, to London, to Boston, anywhere safer than here. His eyes, once sharp with calculation, now carry the weight of something else, the knowledge that his empire is dying, and no one will admit it. But not everyone sleeps. In the imperial bureaucracy, a few voices rise above the silence. They speak not only of profit and trade, but of honor and survival. Among them, one name will echo through history: Lin Zexu, a scholar of Confucian virtue, incorruptible, relentless, and fearless. To his mind, the opium crisis is not just a crime. It is a moral rot that threatens heaven's mandate itself. For if an empire cannot govern its people's desires, how can it claim to govern the world? By the late 1830s, the situation is catastrophic. Opium imports have doubled, then tripled. In some coastal regions, 1 in every 10 men is addicted. Armies cannot recruit soldiers fit for battle. Officials cannot perform their duties without a pipe in hand. And all the while, British merchants grow richer, their ships faster, their influence deeper. The very system designed to protect China from foreigners has become their shield. The foreign factories in Canton, meant to contain the West, now conceal its poison. In the villages of the South, famine spreads. Fields lie untended, tools rust, children go hungry. In the North, bandits rise from the mountains, preying on caravans and tax collectors. The social fabric that bound Chinese life for centuries begins to tear apart. Confucian order gives way to chaos, ritual gives way to hunger, morality gives way to addiction. And yet, most continue to believe the empire eternal. After all, how could something so vast, so ancient, truly fall? One evening, in a tea house overlooking the harbor, 2 old scholars sit in quiet conversation. One speaks bitterly. "The barbarians bring poison, and we welcome them with silver. We drink their smoke, we call it pleasure, and we watch our sons forget their duties. Is this not the death of the Middle Kingdom?" The other sighs. "Perhaps it is not death," he says softly. "Perhaps it is sleep, and all who sleep eventually must awaken." Far to the north, in the Forbidden City, the emperor at last begins to stir. Reports arrive daily now, of soldiers unfit for battle, of tax shortfalls, of officials dying from the pipe. He reads, in disbelief, that foreign merchants defy imperial edicts and sell their poison openly on Chinese soil. Outrage builds, then resolve. He will send someone to Canton, someone incorruptible, someone who cannot be bought or intimidated, to cleanse the empire and restore its dignity. That man will be Lin Zexu. But for now, the empire sleeps. The poppy blooms in every field. The silver flows outward like blood. The people dream of pleasure while the foundations of their world crumble beneath them. The sun is setting over Canton. The harbor glows red. Somewhere on the horizon, ships are already sailing from India, their holds packed tight with thousands of chests of opium, the next wave in a tide that will drown an empire. And in Beijing, the emperor signs a decree, a final attempt to stop what has already begun. The stage is set. The war for China's soul is about to begin. Part 4. The Storm Gathers. Commissioner Lin Zexu and the War of Morality. Spring, 1839. The southern winds carry the scent of salt and smoke over Canton. The city waits, restless. Foreign merchants whisper of new imperial decrees, of tighter patrols, of a man sent from the north with powers no one has ever seen before. His name passes from mouth to mouth like a warning, Lin Zexu. In Beijing, Lin Zexu is known as the empire's iron pillar, austere, incorruptible, and feared by officials who thrive on compromise. To his followers, he is the embodiment of Confucian virtue, a man who sees morality not as ceremony, but as duty. He believes that the emperor rules not by force, but by example, and that corruption is the root of every downfall. When he accepts his mission to end the opium crisis, he knows it may destroy him, yet he also knows that if no one acts, the empire will collapse from within. His journey to Canton takes weeks. Couriers ride ahead to announce his coming. Soldiers march behind him. Wherever he passes, opium dens close in fear, and officials scramble to burn evidence. By the time he reaches the southern coast, the foreign traders are already nervous. For years, they have bribed local officials to look away. But Lin Zexu cannot be bribed. He has come not to negotiate, but to cleanse. On May 18, 1839, he arrives at the foreign factories by the river. His face is calm, his robes immaculate, his eyes unwavering. He summons the foreign merchants and reads aloud the emperor's command. All opium in China must be surrendered, immediately. Without compensation, those who resist will face death. The foreigners protest. They claim that trade is their right, that they are subjects of another crown, not servants of the Chinese emperor. Lin listens in silence, then answers with words that will echo through the centuries. Heaven created all men equal. If you bring poison to destroy others, you destroy yourself. There is no mercy in justice. He gives them 3 days. The merchants delay. They negotiate, stall, and send frantic letters to their superiors. Among them, one man stands out, Charles Elliot, the British superintendent of trade. He is torn between duty and conscience. He knows that opium is illegal in China, yet his country profits from it. He fears bloodshed, but also fears disobedience to London. In the end, under immense pressure, he orders all British merchants to hand over their opium to the Chinese authorities, trusting that Britain will later compensate them. So, between March and June 1839, a staggering 20,000 chests of opium, more than £2.5 million, are surrendered to Lin Zexu. It is the largest drug seizure in human history. For 23 days, under Lin's supervision, the opium is destroyed at Humen, near the mouth of the Pearl River. The chests are smashed open, the black resin dissolved in lime and salt water, and the toxic slurry poured into the sea. The process is ritual, deliberate, and public. Thousands watch as the poison that enslaved their nation dissolves into nothing. It is a moment of triumph, of cleansing, of moral rebirth. For a brief moment, China seems awake again. But across the ocean, in London, the reaction is very different. To the British government and merchants, Lin's act is not justice. It is an insult. They see not the moral struggle of a wounded empire, but the destruction of private property. They speak of national honor, trade rights, and free enterprise. Newspapers in London portray Lin as a tyrant, an enemy of civilization. The merchants, backed by powerful investors, demand compensation. Parliament debates. And soon, moral outrage gives way to political opportunity. The British Empire, armed with the Industrial Revolution and convinced of its own superiority, decides to teach China a lesson. In late 1839, British warships sail from India toward the Chinese coast. They are unlike anything the Qing Navy has ever seen. Steam-powered, armored, and armed with explosive shells. They move with precision and speed, guided by officers trained in modern warfare. The Chinese fleet, by contrast, consists mostly of wooden junks, slow and outdated. When the two forces meet near the Pearl River, the result is inevitable. The first battle of the First Opium War begins with thunder. Explosions light the water. The sky turns black with smoke. Chinese cannons fire blindly from the shore, their iron balls bouncing harmlessly off the hulls of British ships. The British guns answer with devastating force. Forts crumble, ships burn, soldiers flee. In hours, the empire that had called itself eternal learns that time has passed it by. Word reaches Beijing like a storm. The emperor, shocked, demands answers. His generals promise victory. His courtiers blame one another. But the truth is clear. China is facing a power it does not understand. The British have not only better weapons, they have a new kind of power, born of industry, technology, and relentless ambition. Lin Zexu refuses to surrender. He writes letter after letter to London, appealing to morality and reason. Why, he asks, do you sell a poison that destroys our people when you forbid it among your own? His words fall on deaf ears. For the merchants of empire, morality is not currency. As the British advance along the coast, capturing city after city, Lin's authority falters. His reports grow desperate. Supplies run short. The people begin to doubt him, and yet, even in defeat, he remains steadfast. Better to die in righteousness, he writes, than to live in shame. By 1842, the war is lost. The British fleet sails up the Yangtze River, threatening even Nanjing. The Qing court, humiliated and exhausted, has no choice but to sue for peace. The resulting treaty will change Asia forever. It will be called the Treaty of Nanking. It will open 5 ports to British trade. It will grant foreigners the right to live and work under their own laws. It will force China to pay 21 million silver dollars in reparations, and it will cede Hong Kong to Britain in perpetuity. The emperor signs, his hand trembling. The ink dries, but the wound it marks will bleed for a century. Lin Zexu, though blamed for the defeat, remains a hero in the hearts of his people. He fought for principle in a time of corruption, for morality in an age of greed. His letters will be remembered as the conscience of a collapsing empire. But the opium does not stop. The trade returns, stronger than ever, protected now by treaty. The poison flows openly through the ports that once resisted it. The dream of sovereignty fades, and the people, who had once watched the destruction at Human with hope, return to the pipe. The empire has survived the war, but its spirit has not. What began as a moral stand has ended in humiliation, and yet, from that humiliation, a new kind of fire will be born, a quiet, enduring anger that will shape China's destiny for generations to come. The storm has passed, but the air is still heavy. In the silence that follows, the world begins to change. Part 5. The century of humiliation, the aftermath of defeat, and the rebirth of a nation. The guns fall silent, but the silence is not peace. It is surrender. Across China, the people whisper the name of a new word they have learned from the foreigners: treaty. They do not yet understand its full meaning, but soon they will. It is a word that will define a century of their history, a century of loss, division, and awakening. The Treaty of Nanking marks the end of the First Opium War. On parchment, it reads like a list of terms. In truth, it is a carving of the Chinese heart. 5 ports, Canton, Amoy, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, are opened to foreign trade. The British gain rights to live, trade, and govern themselves within these cities, untouched by Chinese law. A vast indemnity of silver drains the imperial treasury, and the small rocky island of Hong Kong, dismissed by Chinese officials as worthless, is ceded to Britain forever. In London, the politicians celebrate. The newspapers declare it a triumph of civilization over despotism, of free trade over tyranny. But in China, the victory feels like a curse. For the first time in its long history, the Middle Kingdom bows before a foreign power. The illusion of invincibility shatters. The opium trade, once fought in secret, now floods openly through the treaty ports. British and American merchants build grand houses on the Bund of Shanghai. Western banks, missions, and factories rise where Chinese fishermen once lived. The streets of Canton fill with signs in English, Portuguese, and French. Silver, tea, and silk flow outward. Opium flows in. The empire that once held the world's wealth now watches it vanish through its own harbors. In the countryside, the suffering deepens. Farmers lose their land to debt. Local officials sell their positions to the highest bidder. Soldiers, unpaid and addicted, turn to banditry. Floods and famine strike, and the imperial court, bankrupt and paralyzed, can do little to help. The mandate of heaven, once the divine justification for rule, feels broken. Lin Zexu, dismissed and disgraced, lives his final years in quiet exile. Yet history remembers him differently. To later generations, he will not be a failure but a prophet, a man who saw what others could not. Those who profit from poison, he once wrote, will one day be poisoned themselves. His warning will echo for centuries. The years that follow bring no respite. In 1856, another conflict ignites, the Second Opium War. Britain, joined now by France, demands more concessions. When Chinese officials board a British-registered ship to search for smugglers, the empire takes it as provocation. Once again, Western gunboats return, their iron hulls gliding up the rivers like dark omens. Once again, the forts crumble, and once again, China signs another treaty, this time even harsher than before. The Treaty of Tientsin and later the Convention of Peking grant the Western powers more ports, more rights, more land. Foreigners may travel freely through the country. Missionaries may preach their faith in every province. Opium, the very poison that began it all, is now legal. And in 1860, as British and French troops march into Beijing, they set fire to the Summer Palace, the jewel of the Qing Dynasty, filled with centuries of art and history. The flames burn for days. Priceless treasures melt into ash. One British officer writes home, "We have destroyed a fairyland." For the Chinese, it is not a victory, it is humiliation beyond measure. The empire survives, but it is no longer whole. Within, rebellions erupt. The Taiping Rebellion, led by a failed scholar who claims to be the brother of Jesus Christ, sweeps across the south, leaving 20 million dead. In the north, Muslim uprisings tear through Gansu and Yunnan. The court clings to power through corruption, foreign loans, and compromise. China, once the world's greatest empire, becomes a patchwork of fiefdoms, its sovereignty fragmented between foreign powers and warlords. The century that follows will be remembered as the century of humiliation. It begins with the Treaty of Nanking and will not end until the founding of the People's Republic in 1949. During that time, China will lose wars to Japan, suffer invasion, famine, and revolution. But within that darkness, a quiet strength will begin to grow. By the late 19th century, a new generation of Chinese thinkers begins to ask a dangerous question. Why did the empire fall? Some blame the foreign powers, others the corruption of the court. But the most courageous voices look inward. They see that the real enemy is complacency, the belief that greatness is eternal. They begin to speak of reform, of science, of learning from the West. Movements like the self-strengthening movement and later the 100 Days Reform try to revive China through modernization. But the old guard resists. The court fears change more than defeat. Then, in 1911, the impossible happens. The Qing Dynasty, after nearly 3 centuries of rule, collapses. The last emperor, a boy of 6, abdicates. The empire ends not with an invasion, but with exhaustion. The Republic of China is born. For the first time in thousands of years, the Middle Kingdom is without a dynasty. The old world is gone. Yet the shadow of the Opium Wars remains. It lingers in the broken treaties, in the foreign enclaves, in the memory of burned palaces and poisoned generations. It becomes a scar carried by the Chinese people, a reminder that weakness invites humiliation and that sovereignty, once lost, is not easily regained. In the decades that follow, China's struggle for renewal continues through war and revolution. The opium that once enslaved the nation becomes a symbol of everything it must overcome. When the new communist government finally bans opium in 1950, it does so with ferocity. Within a few years, addiction nearly vanishes. To the modern Chinese state, this is not merely public policy. It is redemption. Even now, nearly 2 centuries later, the lessons of that era shape the nation's identity. The memory of the Opium Wars still informs its foreign policy, its economic ambitions, and its deep suspicion of external influence. To forget that history would be to risk repeating it. And so, the story comes full circle. What began with silver and silk ended with fire and sorrow. A flower once sold as medicine became the instrument of ruin. But from that ruin rose something unbreakable, a determination to never again be conquered, not by armies, not by trade, not by addiction. The Middle Kingdom, humbled but not destroyed, began to rise again, slowly, painfully, but with purpose. History has many empires. Most fall and vanish, but some learn. And China, awakened by its century of humiliation, would one day rise from the smoke of its own past to stand among the powers of the modern world, not as victim, but as survivor. Conclusion: the flower that changed the world. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this: a small poppy flower swaying gently in the warm winds of Bengal, its petals delicate, its fragrance subtle, its sap rich and white as milk. To most, it looks harmless, beautiful even. Yet within that flower lies the story of greed, empire, and human frailty. It is the seed of one of history's greatest tragedies and the root of a nation's awakening. When we look back at the Opium Wars, it's tempting to see them simply as another chapter of imperial conquest, one empire exploiting another. But the deeper truth is far more complex. The fall of the Qing Dynasty was not caused by a single war or treaty. It was the result of a chain of choices by merchants, by officials, by emperors, by ordinary people, each one small, each one seemingly justified, until the sum of them became catastrophe. The opium trade exposed more than China's vulnerability. It revealed the fragility of human morality itself. In the grand halls of London, men of industry and parliament convinced themselves that they were champions of free trade. They spoke of markets and civilization, of opportunity and enterprise. But what they truly sold was dependence. What they truly bought was time. Time for their own empire to expand, no matter the cost to others. To them, the suffering of distant peoples was an acceptable price for profit. And in Beijing, men cloaked in silks of power convinced themselves that they ruled by divine mandate, that their ancient ways were eternal. They dismissed the outside world as barbaric, the Western machines as curiosities, the foreign merchants as insects at the gate. But pride can blind even the wise. While China slept, the world changed. When it awoke, it was already surrounded. So the story of opium is not merely China's tragedy. It is a mirror held up to us all. It shows what happens when arrogance meets greed, when power forgets compassion, when the pursuit of gain outweighs the value of humanity. It reminds us that the fall of great civilizations is never sudden. It begins quietly, in whispers, in smoke, in choices that seem too small to matter. But within that darkness, there is also light. For China's fall was not its end. Out of humiliation came resilience. Out of suffering came reform, and from the ashes of addiction rose a determination to reclaim not only sovereignty, but dignity. Generations of Chinese thinkers, writers, and revolutionaries would dedicate their lives to ensuring that their nation would never again bow to foreign powers. Their efforts, spanning reform, revolution, and renewal, would eventually reshape the map of Asia and redefine what it meant to be a modern nation. When Mao Zedong declared in 1949 that China has stood up, he was not simply announcing a political victory. He was closing a circle that had begun over a century earlier on the shores of Canton, when foreign ships arrived carrying their fragrant poison. For the first time in generations, the Chinese people could look outward not as subjects of empire, but as citizens of a sovereign state. And yet, even today, the ghost of the poppy still lingers. Not in the fields or the pipes, but in the national memory. It lives in the caution with which China views the world, in its insistence on strength, unity, and independence. Every policy, every negotiation, every expression of national pride carries within it the echo of that long century of humiliation, the reminder that weakness invites exploitation and that the world does not forgive innocence. But perhaps the greatest lesson of all lies not in the politics, but in the humanity of it. The story of the Opium Wars is not only about nations, it is about people. About farmers who turned from rice to poppies because their children were hungry. About merchants who chose profit over conscience, believing the ends justified the means. About soldiers who fought with bravery against impossible odds. About addicts who sought only a moment's escape from the unbearable weight of their lives. They were all caught in the same tide, individual lives swept away by the current of history. It is easy, with distance, to speak of destiny and empire. But when you look closely, history is never written by destiny. It is written by decisions, millions of them, made by people who believed they had no choice. And so, we are left with one haunting truth. Civilizations do not fall because they are conquered. They fall because they forget to question themselves. The poppy was not the weapon that destroyed China. It was only the catalyst. The real destruction came from within, from complacency, corruption, and the illusion of invulnerability. It came from forgetting that strength, like wealth, must be renewed, not inherited. And yet, in the quiet aftermath of that fall, something remarkable happened. China endured. It remembered. It rebuilt. It learned that even the deepest wounds can become foundations, that even humiliation can give birth to resolve. Today, as ships once again crowd the harbors of Hong Kong and Shanghai, carrying goods, technology, and ambition instead of opium, the story has turned upon itself. Where once foreign merchants came seeking profit, now Chinese traders, investors, and builders move across the world. The empire that fell has risen, transformed, modern, yet forever marked by its past. History has not been kind to China, but it has been instructive, and the lesson it offers to every nation is simple and timeless. No empire is eternal. No power is immune to decay, and no civilization can endure without humility. So as the night deepens and your thoughts drift toward rest, remember the sound of that faraway harbor, the creaking of wooden ships, the hiss of opium smoke, the quiet sigh of a civilization in twilight. Remember how one flower changed the fate of millions, and remember, above all, that history is never distant. It is alive, breathing through every decision we make, every comfort we take for granted, every illusion we choose to believe. Empires rise, empires fall, and through it all, humanity remains. Fragile, flawed, but capable of learning. Sleep now, traveler. The story is told, the smoke has cleared, and the lesson endures. Power without conscience is always its own undoing. For even the mightiest empires, like the men who build them, are but dust in the turning wind.